for inviting me, and it's great to meet everybody here tonight. The company that I started is called The Industry, and I thought that instead of talking about what I've done, or I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm working on next in the new opera based on Calvino's book Invisible Cities opening in October, I thought instead of that, I'll take you in a little bit into the process that I'm sort of going through in terms of deciding how opera can still feel like a contemporary art form. I think, how many people here have actually been to an opera in Los Angeles? Okay, that seems actually a pretty good amount, which is terrific. I think that there's a really lively scene here in Los Angeles that I'm really proud to be part of, and especially in this experimental wing of what opera is. And I wanted to start by just saying a quote that has maybe in many ways led me to what opera is, and it's by the director Ruth Berghaus, who says that art is a riddle, and as soon as you've solved it, it's vanished. And I read that right after I graduated from school and was living in Berlin. And I read that quote, and something about that completely resonated with me and made me think, that sounds right, and that sounds like exactly what art should be doing. And I was surprised to find out that this woman named Ruth Berghaus was actually a very well-known director for opera. And then I started thinking, well, why would people look at opera as an art form that had to be approached like a riddle? I would think of that maybe as theater, or I would think of that for visual arts, or I would think about that in a number of other ways. But what makes opera something riddle-like? And I think that to figure out what that is, we have to go back to the origins of opera. We have to go back to the 16th century in Italy when opera first began, and was this very audacious meeting place of a composer, a poet, a scenographer, a choreographer, a singer, a dancer, and what they did is basically all come together without a set plan and without an idea about what they were going to be doing, but instead discovered what this thing called opera could be. They had to call it opera because in Italian that just means work. And that suddenly sounds very contemporary when you think that opera as work and not as something that already has these genre connotations is something that feels like what a lot of contemporary artists are doing. And also the idea of the interdisciplinary, the idea that all of these different disciplines are being thrown together without a clear roadmap, but with only the idea of let's discover what we can all do together that takes all of our individual arts into a new place. So I think that that's closer to what we would think of as riddle-like, because how do these arts come together, and how do they unify in one way or another? So what's happened to opera in the intervening centuries that's made it seem more like a stable of classical values, and the idea that traditional ideas are most at home in opera as opposed to anywhere else? Well, I think what's mostly happened is that the art forms have all come together and completed each other in ways that might be called predictable. So if you've been to an opera in which you hear the big thunderous music and that's the moment where one of the characters is supposed to stab the other one, or of course the moment where it's become a cliche where they throw themselves into each other's arms and have an amazing kiss. And that's kind of that idea of replicating, the idea of what you see replicates what you hear. And likewise, if you see the opera Aida on the program, you're going to be expecting pyramids and sphinxes and elephants. So this idea that everything actually just reinforces either things you already know or each other in a way that's very involved. And I think that the genesis of opera and the interest of opera is where those arts can diverge, and in which there can be a friction, but a friction that then creates an excitement. And that's, I think, where opera started, and that's where I really want to be focusing on opera's future. And so the pictures that you've been seeing are from the first opera that we did. It was called Crescent City. We did it at Atwater Crossing. It was a massive intersection of a brand new piece by Anne LeBaron and Douglas Kearney, and it was brought to life with 6 visual artists that took over this 25,000 square foot warehouse, and the audience was invited to wander around the perimeter of this warehouse and see the opera from a lot of different perspectives. And this really appealed to me because suddenly the idea of the hierarchies of opera were really broken down, and everybody that was part of the experience, the artists as well as the audience, had a lot of different vantage points to approach this particular performance with. The next piece that we're doing, as Dana let you know, Invisible Cities, a fantastic book by Calvino. If you haven't read it, it's fantastic summer reading. And it's a book that is very much about the reader's experience over any sort of authorial intention. There's a line from the book in which one of the characters says, it's not the speaker that dictates the story, it's the ear. And I've always loved that aspect of the book, the idea that the reader's experience or the artist's experience is what is the most important thing, and that it's the author's job to lead the reader without necessarily creating a fixed set of meanings. So what we've done for this particular production, it's going to be opening October 19th. We're doing it at Union Station. It's going to be in the entire historical part of Union Station, and the audience will hear the work via wireless headphones. So the singers and dancers will be mixing in and among the everyday life of Union Station. The station is continuing as normal. We're not closing it down at all. So everybody that would normally go through the station will still be there, but in and among that life will be people that are telling a story and creating an operatic experience. The orchestra is live and is playing in another building, and you as the audience member have the freedom to wander through the entire building and choose your own adventure, basically. It's a really exciting experiment. We're right in this middle point of the process. Well, it's actually more towards the end of the process when I really want to face it. We're opening in 2.5 months. But we're still at the point where we're discovering what this piece is going to be. It's a really exciting place, and it's an exciting place that opera usually doesn't cross into, which is that idea of exploration. And I think that's where we really get to that idea of that riddle. For us, we're still discovering what that riddle is that's keeping us going and creating this particular project. And to also quote someone that Ruth Berghaus was inspired by, Wieland Wagner, another very famous director, very radical director of his grandfather, Richard Wagner's works. He says that every production is a journey towards an unknown destination. And I've loved that quote, and I feel like that's something that is the essence of art making. Is it's not necessarily about knowing the destination, but about creating a journey that can inspire both the artists making it and the audiences that come to see it. Thank you.
Wow, that was fantastic. And I've got to recommend that you have to go see Invisible Cities when it comes out, because it's going to be very surreal and the music is really compelling and beautiful. I've heard excerpts of it.